go ahead and get started talking about the New Deal. So the first thing we do is go to my website, which is drtidwell 3, drtidwell3.com. Then you scroll down. So this was on the like when we first opened it up. You're going to scroll down to, in this case here, where it says AP US History. Click on that. Then it's going to give you a link to my blog. And then for that, what you want to do next is go down to where it says Unit 5 Cliff Notes. It should be right here. And the essential question that we want to focus on today is going to be, was the New Deal successful? And what were the social, political, economic effects of the New Deal? Please be mindful that as you guys go through this process, you want to take notes, but you also want to make sure you guys are paying attention. And hopefully this helps you guys out with any kind of work you may be doing in the class, particularly the idea of having alphabet soup. So we're going to scroll down past World War I, because we're now past that. We also be past the Great Depression. So remember, the New Deal was implemented by FDR, who became our president, and he basically wanted to try to help everybody out in what was known as the New Deal program. Okay, so the New Deal starts right here, right after we talk about the Hoover Bills, with putting people to work. What I want to do is also make sure you guys remember there's two New Deals. There's the first one, there's the second one. So some programs like the Wagner was really part of, the Wagner was one of the first reforms of Roosevelt's second New Deal. So you have some that's part of the first and second New Deal. If you have the alphabet soup assignment that I always pass out to my students, to make sure you know the difference between the two of them. The one thing I do want to make sure you guys know about is talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt was extremely important when you look at the idea of women and then the whole role of this idea of the first lady. Okay. So she was the wife of Eleanor Roosevelt of FDR, and she was very influential in her own right. She did a lot of humanitarian work, and she also really became very vocal in the White House. And many people saw her as being the president, particularly as the health of FDR started to decline during his last terms in office. Okay. So one of my major assignments I have here is the New Deal. Talk about a cultural ethnic perspective, where you look at the New Deal as far as how did it affect women, Black Americans, and the poor. But today, what I want to focus in on is going to be this presentation as far as the New Deal. So click on that. And I'm going to walk you guys through this whole presentation. The videos I'm going to leave for you guys to go back and watch on your own. I'm going to focus on the meat and butter of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and make this enlarged. So again, the videos, I'm going to leave that for you to really kind of go into depth with. But I'm going to make sure I go through other aspects of the New Deal. And again, this happened right after the 1920s and the Great Depression. The New Deal lasted up to, we have a lot of the same government things, with those government organizations we're about to talk about now to this day. But it really kind of started kicking back a little bit after World War II, because you had the mass involvement in production of goods and services during World War II. So this crash course does a good job of going into the New Deal as overall conceptual idea as far as the 411. But the New Deal was FDR's plan to get the United States out of the Great Depression. He wanted to ease the suffering of the American people and also prevent the depression from ever happening again. Keep in mind, in 2008, we did have another mini depression, or what we now know as the Great Recession, but it was still a very hard time. So during his first 100 days of presidency, Congress passed hundreds of new bills as part of the New Deal legislation. And a lot of those bills came back to be seen as unconstitutional, but the New Deal did consist of programs and laws that fell into three categories. It was either going to be relief, recovery, or reform. Relief programs are ones that help the poor and jobless. Recovery programs focus on repairing the economy. And then as far as that's relief, recovery. And then as far as reform, was focused more so on changing the U.S. financial system as far as the stock market and banks, to try to help prevent another recession, or depression from occurring. The first one we got is the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. This is a New Deal program that's really trying to help young men get jobs. Particularly, these young men was white Americans, and they got jobs where they went out and planted trees to preserve the environment, to build bridges. And these particular programs, they were given no more than $1 a day. It's okay, sometimes a little bit more, which is really good if you was making no money at all. This was a relief program. Okay, let's keep moving on. All right, these are some pictures of those individuals working. The TVA is the next bill. Excuse me. Next we're going to talk about. This was a relief program, and the whole goal of this program was to really give much needed jobs to those that was they're very difficult in Tennessee, and we also wanted to create dams to help Tennessee. And what these dams is, they gave electrical power and also jobs and also better water source for those farms in those areas. The next one will be AAA. We're not talking about the organization that we get called when we have car issues, but in this case here, we actually are talking about Agriculture Adjustment Administration. In this case here, this was developed in 1933. This was a recovery program. This was part of FDR's second New Deal program. And the goal here was to pay farmers to grow certain crops. This was to help control overproduction. This was later to be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So we no longer have it, but it was thrown out by the Supreme Court because of that. The next one we have is going to be the FDIC. The FDIC was one of the first things he did when he closed the banks and declared a blank holiday. The FDIC in 1933 would then insure money that people put into the banks in case the banks failed. So now if you have up to $250,000 in the bank, this reform program will help insure your money. Just the same way we have medical insurance or even car insurance. Many of the banks we remember is going to be J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. A lot of these banks have different names today, but they all draw back to this time period. The next thing we have is the WPA, which was the Works Progress Administration. This was a relief program that was created in 1939. And what this program did was give jobs for people to building bridges, schools, and also hire artists to make murals. This organization created over 8 million jobs and was by far the biggest New Deal program and also one of the most successful ones. Okay, so some more pictures for you guys to see the WPA in work. Next one we talk about is the NRA. We're not talking about the National Rifle Association. We actually talking about the National Recovery Administration. And this was a recovery program that was later found and removed for being unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. This program, the whole idea was to get rid of the idea of monopolies and set prices for goods and minimum wage for workers. Remember, this is some of the same things we're talking about dating back to the Gilded Age with J.P. Morgan Chase and those monopolies and things of that nature as well too. The Wagner Act. I'm sorry about that. The Wagner Act was part of the second New Deal program back in 1935. This was a relief program. The whole idea about the Wagner Act took the place of the NRA, which was declared unconstitutional. So the Wagner Act basically came back and took over what we now know as the NRA. And this act helped workers gain more rights in the workplace and also allowed workers to go on strike and allow them to join unions as well. So again, this replaced the unconstitutional NRA, and this was another relief program. All right, the next one, guys, Social Security. Social Security we still have to this day. This was a relief program as well. It's part of the second New Deal, passed in 1935. And the goal here was to take money from your paycheck when you are young, and it gives it back to you once you turn 65 years old. Problem is, when you have a generation like the baby boomers that are living well past 65 years old, even 79 years old, the money is becoming depleted because not a lot of people are able to get it. So our generation, between my generation, also your generation as students, are not going to most likely see a lot of money from this. But it's a great idea, and we still have it, and we still are paying into this no matter what. Social Security card, most of us have that as American citizens. The next one will be the REA. What the REA did was this was both a relief and recovery program. And by the end of the Great Depression, 25% of farmers had electricity on their farms because of the REA. So what it did, it gave the idea that we had only 10% of the population living on farms. So those farms need to be able to have electricity to be able to function right and give us food to eat. So this really helped those individuals that live on the farms, also helped the United States public as a whole. Next up we have is the PWA, which is the Public Works Administration. What this did was, again, go back and give another relief program, which was used over $6 million for this New Deal program, just to get people back out to work, where they build bridges, dams, hospitals, and schools, and things of that nature. This happened in 1933. Many of the dams and bridges we have are all made by this program. So let's talk more about the Wagner Act and the rise of industrial unions. So we already had unions like the AFL, which dated back to the Gilded Age, what was going on with the monopolies and trusts at the time period. But this video here is really good because it gets you more into what the Wagner Act is. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Make sure you guys take a look at that. But the National Labor Relations Act, better known as the Wagner Act, again, the Wagner Act and the National Labor Relations Act is the same thing. In case you see that's an assessment, make sure you guys remember. This was one of the first reforms done by Roosevelt during his second New Deal. The law was really to try to give more power to workers by allowing them to form unions and allow them to also strike. At this time, remember, unions did not have a lot of power, even though everything that happened with the trust monopolies era. So they're still trying to fight for that. The law also set up the government agency where workers could testify about unfair labor practices and hold elections to decide whether or not they want to become unions. There were some issues with it though, because the AFL was very hesitant to organize industrial unionism because they were very much committed to the railroad and craft-based workers. So then, as a consequence, Congress of Industrial Organizations, which is known as the CIO, was created to represent those workers that was industrial. And then later in 1955, the AFL and CIO, who still exist today, kind of merged together. So now we have unions to protect both those that were in craft-based work, so like such as carpenters, also railroad, and also those people that was industrial work. Now, Roosevelt, we spoke about her a little bit earlier. This will be a great video to have you review her as being the first lady and really kind of change the dynamic of what a first lady will be and is to this day. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is going to be talking about the court packing bill, Roosevelt's domestic and international leadership, and then we're also going to talk about neutrality. The first thing we'll talk about is that he had a very big critic. His name was Huey Long from Louisiana. He really supported the idea of the New Deal initially, but then he later changed his mind as he sought to actually run for president. Long proposed for every American to have a home, food, clothes, and education, amongst other things, but the question always will be, how is that going to get paid? In Europe, when World War II started, America was not ready to get in. America did not want to be in another war. In fact, Congress passed a series of neutrality acts which made it illegal to sell any arms or any loans to the nations at war. Remember, this is something that the United States did very much prominently during World War I. So the fourth of these acts was passed in 1939 in recognition of Nazi becoming a threat to Western Europe. In this case here, we did what was called a cash and carry, which means that the buyers had to pay cash and then send their own ships over to American shores to pick up goods and ammunition and take it back home. So therefore, we're no longer neutral, but we're neutral in the sense where we're not sending nobody over. Now, the next one will be the court packing bills that was passed by FDR. His goal was to really to be able to appoint an extra Supreme Court justice for every sitting justice over the age of 70 and a half years old. Because remember, Supreme Court justice or every federal judge appointment is a lifetime appointment. You only stop when you want to stop. So Roosevelt planned to use his bill powers to add more of his supporters to the Supreme Court to uphold his New Deal programs. Remember, they did find something to be unconstitutional, but the version of the law passed by Congress weakened the power he desired. He actually did not get the power he wanted. And what I have coming up next is a couple of videos to help you out. The first video really gets more into details about the Neutrality Act and the food shortage going on during World War II. And then the second video gets more into the idea of what was going on with the reshaping of the Supreme Court and the court packing. I definitely suggest you watch both these videos on your own. That is everything I have for the New Deal. So it's pretty straightforward. We basically filling in that gap between the Great Depression, trying to get us out of the Great Depression, leading into World War II. However, keep in mind, even though a lot of these programs were put into place, it did not get us out of the Great Depression. What ended up getting us out of the Great Depression was, in fact, World War II. And we will talk about that more on our next mini lecture. All right, thanks a lot. And